So let's kick this first session off, which I think is a really important session. Having personally worked client-side at Unilever for many years and now agency side through CoCubed, it's been interesting seeing how different clients and agencies work together. And there's still a lot of work to be done in this space. So to introduce today's panel and this topic of how clients and agencies can work better together, please join me in welcoming our panel. Gareth from Weetabix, Paulo from The Or, and Jane from what3words.
Thank you. I've got all sorts of stuff going on here. I've got so many things to keep control of. Bear with me. Right. Oh, no. So, no guts, no glory. And we're talking here about client-agency relationships, and it's time we grew the flip up and started treating each other a bit better, basically. Started treating each other like adults, to take that brave step to treat each other better. We've got a 20-minute fireside chat. I've got the app thing here. If you're going to put some questions in, please put some questions in. We'll try, if it's working, we'll take those. I'm Gareth. I'm head of marketing at Weetabix. 23 years. I know. I don't look it. Thank you. 23 years client-side experience, working at brands at Heineken, Arla Foods, currently at Weetabix, and in 2 weeks today, I'm leaving Weetabix to set up my own business, to a marketing consultancy called Big Black Door. So keep your eyes open for that. Now, to introduce my guests, we have Paulo, who's the co-founder of Or, which is a sister agency launched by Mother last year. And in a little over a year, Or's got 10 great clients, ranging from people like YouTube, Taco Bell, to exciting scale-ups like Bloom and Wild and Gorillas. Before the Or, Paulo spent 10 years at Widens, where he was, it says here, one of their most decorated business leaders. I think that was your words, Paulo. Yeah, it's definitely not my words. And he worked across Lurpak, Honda, 3Mobile, Southern Comfort, and Mondelez. And he's head of the 50-strong account handling department. Before Widens, he spent close to another 10 years at TBWA, working across accounts like PlayStation, Adidas, and John Smith's, which means, Paulo wrote this, that he's had the pleasure of working with me twice on John Smith's at Heineken and on Lurpak when I was at...
You're sweating about that one.
Pleasure. It says here, pleasure. Jane here is head of partner marketing at what3words, a tech company that aims to help the world talk about precise locations more easily. Have a 40-person in-house team and a range of agencies with different disciplines. As well as working with global partners like Airbnb, Mercedes-Benz, Emergency Services to communicate the sometimes life-saving benefits of what3words to your audiences. And prior to this, Jane spent 10 years agency side, learning the ropes at DLKW Low, and then going on to head up account management at Creature, where I also worked with Jane when I was leading the butter business on Anchor. So, first, some context on this. I did some research some time ago. Oh, we're back on with the slides now. Hang on. So I did some research on this some time ago, and found that there were six factors into the which were common across the best and worst, so positive and negative, of client-agency relationships. But overwhelmingly, the number one reason for the best, and a lack of it, the number one reason for the worst, was understanding. A lack of understanding, whether that's the business objectives, the brand objectives, the brand itself, the customers, or even the humans that sit behind the job titles. The lack of understanding was the number one reason. 40% of people in my survey said that was the number one thing for them. So what does that lack of understanding ends up giving us is some pretty shitty client behaviours sometimes. I'm going to suggest it's not always about clients, but we'll perhaps come on to that, you two. Some pretty shitty client behaviours, and I've taken some inspiration here from dating terminology, so I'm told, that you might have some stashing going on when the agency is a brand manager's secret little project never get shared with the real decision makers. You might have breadcrumbing there when the client seems to be keen, but really they've got no intention of starting that relationship. Benching, you find yourself being a backup option. Ghosting seems to be a hot topic right now, but ghosting, the client you've been dealing with vanishes without a trace. It's cowardly but common. Never by me. Jane, never by me.
I didn't do it.
And then gaslighting, when an agency and client think they've agreed on the feedback or budget for a piece of work, but shortly afterwards the client denies all knowledge of it. So it's time we grew up, we stopped that sort of shit behaviour. It's time we all grew up and started behaving like adults. Paulo, do those behaviours resonate with you?
Definitely. I mean, they don't always happen at the same time, right? I think these things kind of come sort of over time, and it's sort of dependent on the environment that you're kind of creating between you, well, as in an agency and the client. But they do definitely happen. I think that and no one is going to sort of avoid them sort of like happening. I think the sort of trick is to sort of know if any of these things are about to happen or at risk of happening, and sort of being quite prompt in rectifying it.
Yeah, but Jane, I'm going to suggest that agencies aren't blameless in this. And in my research, around a quarter of clients said that agencies weren't respectful to them. Not respectful. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's very interesting because I sort of flipped from one side to the other, and I remember working as an agency on tech clients and being like, oh my God, they're so stressful, a nightmare, and all of these behaviors, and then going to work for a tech company and being like, oh my God, I understand, like it's hectic and everything is changing all the time. And I think one thing that you then understand the client side is you can tell when you're being like lied to or like hustled by an agency, and you're like, I can see that something's going on and you're telling me the full truth. And I think, I mean, we talked about it a bit, but like the sort of honesty element, it's like, there's issues, there's always going to be something going on both sides. It's a very human relationship. And so getting that out of the works and kind of going, you know, don't overmanage me as a client, like just tell me what's going on. It's that kind of similar feeling. Like,
yeah, honesty and trust came out in the research too. I think there's a budget cut. It happens.
Yeah.
Right? It happens.
Yeah,
and it happens very often. It doesn't mean that we should fall out about it. I think actually a more productive adult respectful relationship here is when I would probably come to you, Paulo, and say, yeah, that Lurpak budget's been cut to whatever. How can we work together to fix this? How can you, because in the agency land, you've got some amazing brains. Why wouldn't I tell you the truth and lean into that brain power to help get to a resolution?
Yeah, I think, look, budget cuts are going to be an ongoing reality, even more so now in terms of the climate that we're going into. I think the thing is, the budget cut's really difficult if you haven't had a relationship where you're both trying to understand each other's businesses deeply, and you should almost have a bit of foresight that those things might be coming. If that thing happens out of the blue, something's already fundamentally wrong, because you should have already been sort of, I think, 2 steps ahead in knowing that might be happening and trying to sort of fix that with the client upstream. So it's only ever a problem if you've, I suppose, been a bit lazy as an agency, and all of a sudden you get that news. It kind of says something about the relationship again that isn't working.
I'm going to suggest as lazy as a client as well. So blimey, I know I'm not perfect, but yesterday I had a quarterly briefing session with one of my lead agencies when we just gave them a bit of a business update. And there are some economic clouds looming at the moment, so it would be wrong of me not to share my budget process, our annual cycle, where we are in that, what it's looking like right now for the next financial year. It'd be wrong. Jane, am I alone in that?
what's that?
Am I the only one who's doing those sort of budgets?
No, I mean, I think there's a lot to be said for, in a company like what3words, our objectives, our situation can change week by week, by month. Like, it's really a pace that I haven't experienced before, and it's kind of something that I do think is the more you can communicate it, bring whoever you're working with on board with that, really help them understand. I mean, I know when we were looking for someone to help us make our TV ad, we were super upfront about we have 10 weeks to do this, and this is the cost, and therefore you get agencies going, yep, I'm on board for that, or I'm not. And I think just being really frank at those stages just means that you're all on the same page. I think it's quite interesting. In my role, I also work with marketeer to marketeer, so with partners, like I was talking about with kind of Mercedes or whatever, and actually the kind of conversation you have there are just, you just feel a bit more frank because you're both on the same page, you can understand their point of view, our point of view, and you have this really honest, objective conversation. It's almost, if you could recreate that with an agency partner, then that's the dream. It's like, yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. And so just moving on a little bit, I reckon that there has to be a value in a great relationship. We sort of start with the why. Why are we doing it? For me, I think better work comes out of a better relationship. And you only have to look at some of the awards, the big awards, the big for creativity and effectiveness, and you see long-term relationships at the heart of a lot of those. You can't tell me that they haven't had the odd bump in the road. So if there is a value in it, is it as simple as you're just not pitching? Is that the value, or is there something deeper than that, Paulo?
I don't know, did I ever talk to you about those 3G principles, types of relationship? That it sort of relates to that. So I used to talk to a lot of account handlers about 3 types of relationship that start to brew almost instantaneously once you sort of set up the relationship. And it's kind of grind. It was kind of grind, glitz, and groove. And grind is that relationship, hopefully, or not hopefully, actually, unfortunately, you might relate to, where it feels like a grind. You're on receive. You don't really know what's coming around the corner. You don't really understand much about the client's business. And to be honest with you, they're not giving the agency much time, right? And that's really difficult for an agency. It's exhausting, and it's a grind. The opposite can actually happen. Agencies aren't perfect. Agencies can also have a relationship where they're the dominant force. They're not really worried too much about the client's business. The client's saying yes quite a lot. And the agency starts to push its own agenda in terms of work out the door. And that's seen as glam or glitzy, right? Seems lovely. The truth is that work tends to be short-lived and not that effective. The groove is what you want to eventually get to, a sense of enlightenment where you're both understanding each other's businesses deeply, having really difficult conversations or great conversations, and the work is still good, but ultimately it's effective because you're learning or spending time learning about each other's kind of strengths and weaknesses, and the work is always long-standing. And I think, agencies might think that glam relationship is the one that you want. You really don't, because those relationships only last 1 or 2 years, and then they're out the door. You want to groove it eventually and push through, see each other, and then that work, that's what 10-year, 20-year relationships, agency and client are.
Paulo, you want to groove it. Maybe later on we'll see that.
It's a bit cheesy, I know.
Jane, I suppose the value for clients, though, is less obvious, I'm going to suggest. I think certainly when I'm speaking to agencies, you get some instant interaction, instant energy, and people understand the reasons behind it. I find it quite hard to get traction with clients talking about this. And probably the ones who need it the most are the ones I get the least traction with, because they're just in this sort of denial. So tell me, what's the value for clients?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think that the difference in some of those relationships that we talked about is maybe the obsession in the result rather than the thing itself. I think it's almost that sometimes it felt like you're kind of, the ad is made, it's played out, let's crack the champagne and go to Cannes. And I think that we, as the client side, are obsessed with, did it work? Is it doing what we need it to do? We literally look at every single Facebook ad and go, is that working better than that one? And I think if your agency can have that same investment in the result and then go, right, actually, I think it doesn't matter if it does matter a bit, but if it doesn't work, but I think we're that is useful information to know. Tell me what we could do differently next time. Let's work on the next thing. And I think just sort of having that, we always talked about proactivity when we were in agency side as a way to kind of keep a client excited. But I think actually it's focused on, on the business objective and on what we can do next. And then I think that you'll have the same obsession that we do about the growth and what we could do after that. And that will keep that kind of long-term conversation going.
Yeah, certainly the relationships I've had with agencies where they've been proactive in coming to me. So we've seen this opportunity. We think this will work, and relating it back to my business objectives because I've been sharing those with them quarterly, monthly, proactively. I think you're kind of touching on it here, Jane. What about hidden objectives in a brief? I think they're often things that kind of go unsaid. Often there's a blank in the budget, TBC. That was a tough conversation with Wydens when that happened once. But tell me, Jane, tell me about the hidden stuff in a brief. How do you uncover that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think for me, it's interesting having worked with an in-house team as opposed to an agency, and actually how frank and honest you are about the myriad objectives going on a brief. When we're working on partner stuff, often there is an objective like working on a partner thing, maybe in emergency services, to go, we want that to, reach the right people and reach the right audience and get people downloading the app and using it. But then we also want another emergency services to see that and get that it works and then do the next thing, et cetera, et cetera. So you're trying to be purist in your objective on the brief, but actually maybe when you're talking to an in-house team, you're really frank about, oh, and it's going to affect this bit of the business and also this bit, and then, we might do this if we do this. And so trying to weed that out. Actually, I think it's interesting for clients to try and imagine you were briefing someone internal rather than external and just being really frank about all the various things. And then, yes, probably trying to distill that to one thing, because that's where you're going to get the best work out. But I think actually them understanding that real context and that everything is connected into what you're already thinking about what it's going to do in a number of other ways, that piece of communication.
Yeah, there's a logic flow. Good briefs have a logic flow. I think good briefs are single-minded and good briefs are collaborative. I think the piece of paper should just be a summary document of conversation. I still hold up, I think you were there, Paulo, when we did the John Smith brief in a hotel in Edinburgh, and the world and their wife were there. We had every stakeholder in the room. We had everyone's opinion heard. And we crafted, every word was crafted of that brief, and we went on to some Golden Arrow winning work. So thank you. Paulo, so anything else hidden in the brief from your point of view?
No, I mean, hidden objectives is massive. I think there's sometimes personal objectives that, someone wants to use this to get promotion or to get another job. That is still an objective that is there, not in plain sight, but it's still something that potentially is worth trying to work out. Cultural objectives, there's a culture that this work needs to kind of go through, understanding what that is and what it's going to sort of do for relationship building internally. All these things are actually quite important, ultimately. I also think not enough time spent onboarding, that kind of courting of each other. I think sometimes agencies are faking it a little bit, and I think clients are faking it back, and so you don't actually know. It's like dating, you don't, if you're just being fake with each other, eventually you're going to live in a house and it's going to just fall apart. So, you do want to be as honest as you possibly can up front so that it's going to work. But how often does that actually happen in pitches, that you are really honest about the agency's objectives and why you want this, and the client does that back in terms of why they need you? I think sometimes it's not totally true and genuine.
Yeah, there's a bit of that. I think that the power of a kick-off meeting was one of the things that came out in this session as well. I'm going to wrapping up. Last question. What sort of a quick answer? It's one that's come in on the app. Would that be your top tip then, Paulo? I'm going to ask you both for your top tip. How to get great client-agency relationships. Paulo, what's your top tip? Something tangible that everyone could walk away from today.
I think the one observation, even when I look at these themes which all resonate, is I think time is our biggest enemy. All of these things are because everyone's too busy. And I think the top tip is you're not going to all of a sudden make a CMO have lots of time for you. I think what you need to do is be really smart about cultivating moments in time where you can still have these relationships and build these bridges that we're talking about. Create ambition sessions, get people mentoring each other, do your evaluations and wash-ups after projects. There are still ways that in a time-poor world you can still build those bridges and these relationships, because time is the enemy here. It's the thing that that causes all of this stuff to happen.
So somehow create time. Jane, what's your top tip?
I think it comes back to respect, really, and I think it can be erased very quickly by a difficult conversation or things in that day-to-day relationship. I think if you can work hard on refinding it, understanding really the client's expertise and everything that they're bringing, really understanding the agency's expertise and everything that they're bringing that you haven't got in your team, and just really working hard on that. Going, you both know each other's values and you've got that kind of shared objective in the middle.
Brilliant, thank you. I think that links back to the theme of today, right? About no guts, no glory. It's a difficult conversation, but it feels a lot better once you've had that conversation. So that's it. I'm happy to send data. I've got stacks of data, right, on this stuff. Happy to send it if people connect with me. Happy to carry on the debate over a coffee, pastry, beer, online, what have you. But thanks to Paulo. Thank you, Paulo. Thanks to Jane. And thanks to everyone here for turning up. I thought it might be empty, but thank you for making the effort, and thank you.